West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM. It's you speaking.
Monday to Sunday.
It's hard to explain, okay? But
all day. All year round.
it's so mysterious.
This is who we are.
This is who we are.
WADR.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Port Novo. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. First, in Ghana, more than 100 suspects are in police custody in connection with the nationwide post-election violence.
We want to use this opportunity to caution those who are perpetrating these acts that so far no firearms have been used yet, but they should not push it because our officers are ready to respond appropriately.
Victims of the October 2022 violence in Chad filed a complaint at a court in N'Djamena seeking justice and reparations. Amnesty International calls for a review of Senegal's family code to achieve gender parity. And in Nigeria, a bill mandating 30% domestic processing of commodities before export passes for a second reading at the Red Chamber.
Today, as a Nigerian, if we must be sincere with ourselves, where can you point to one particular area or one state in the country where you still have factories, industries that are still working the way they are supposed to work? It's just a political statement.
Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and across the sub-region. Now, the United Nations Special Representative for West Africa and the Sahel has congratulated the people of Ghana on the successful holding of the presidential and parliamentary elections held on 7 December 2024. Leonardo Santos Simao highlighted the exemplary responsibility of stakeholders and the commitment of candidates and political leaders to preserve peace throughout the electoral process. This, he said, represents an important step forward in strengthening Ghana's democracy as a model in Africa. Simao also hailed Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia's exemplary and gracious concession calling for unity behind President-elect John Dramani Mahama. The United Nations, in partnership with regional actors, reaffirmed its support to the Ghanaian people in their quest for democratic consolidation and prosperity. Recall on Monday evening, John Dramani Mahama of the National Democratic Congress (NDC) was declared the winner of the 2024 presidential election by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, John Mensah. Meanwhile, the Ghana Police Service (GPS) has arrested 107 suspects linked to violent attacks reported across the country after Saturday's polls. In a statement, the police emphasized a surge in incidents of lawlessness nationwide, cautioning that it may resort to the use of lawful force if the attacks allegedly carried out by supporters of the opposition National Democratic Congress (NDC) persist. From Accra, WADR's Nadir Tete reports.
Ghana's security agencies are grappling with a series of incidents of lawlessness and violence in several parts of the country after Saturday's polls, which saw the country's former president John Mahama stage a historic comeback on the ticket of the National Democratic Congress (NDC), the main opposition party. The most notable cases include disturbances at key national facilities such as Ghana Gas, the National Petroleum Authority, and the Passport Office. In these locations, crowds suspected to be supporters of the NDC demanded employment opportunities, with some resorting to disorderly conduct. ACP Grace Ansah Akrofi is the Director of Public Affairs for the Ghana Police Service.
A similar situation occurred at the passport office, where some people masked up and also demanded that they are given jobs to do. There was also a crowd that formed up around cantonments in Accra, and the intervention of the police working together with the military brought that place situation under control and the people were dispersed. Similar instances occurred at Esuboi at Ayinswanu in the eastern region, Gapoha in Tema.
In Wenchi, in the Bono region, however, the situation took a dramatic turn when a group stormed a police station, freeing suspects in custody. Security agencies have since launched an intelligence operation to re-apprehend the escapees. The police has this caution for the rampaging youth.
We want to use this opportunity to caution those who are perpetrating these acts that so far no firearms have been used yet, but they should not push it because our officers are ready to respond appropriately according to law to ensure that the peace of this country is not taken for granted.
As of now, 107 suspects have been arrested in connection with these violent incidents. For WDR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
Away from Ghana, the Guinean Human Rights Organization bemoans the rights situation in the country during this period of transition. This organization calls on the ruling military to prioritize respect for human rights, but also to take advantage of this period to provide Guinea with a law to protect human rights defenders and whistleblowers. Here is more from WADR's Cheno Alpha Ibrahima about this report, voiced by Augustine Kole.
Every December 10, humanity celebrates International Human Rights Day. But in Guinea, the picture is bleak, according to human rights organizations. Activists Kali Jallo and Alpha Bayo accused the junta of restricting Guineans' freedoms in order to stay in power.
The human rights situation in Guinea is a very dark picture because we can talk about the instrumentalization of justice, kidnapping, arbitrary arrests, and the harassment of people with a critical voice in our country. The situation of human rights is really worrying in the Republic of Guinea. Today, the civic space is very limited. Many media seem to be critical of the authorities of the transition, have seen the alliances is completely withdrawn.
These Guinean activists propose that the junta and the transitional parliament pass a law to protect human rights defenders and whistleblowers.
We must go towards the implementation of a law that protects human rights defenders in the Republic of Guinea and whistleblowers. Their work contributes to establishing the state of law that protects everyone. The organizations that defend human rights must be better organized, accompanied by institutions if we want to respect human rights.
The government, for its part, believes that human rights have completely improved in Guinea since the military came to power. Efforts are on the way to ensure that every Guinean can enjoy these rights while respecting the country's laws, maintains the government spokesman. But a stark contrast to the government's claims indicates several arrests of journalists, political actors, rights defenders, and activists. To date, the whereabouts of two activists, Biloba and Fonike Menge, remain unknown after their adoption reportedly by state security agents months ago.
A report by WADR's Conakry correspondent, Cheno Alpha Ibrahima Balde, and voiced by Augustine Kole. In Chad, 10 victims of the October 2022 deadly confrontations between the police and demonstrators are seeking justice 2 years after the incident. The repression occurred when the then military regime accused protesters of staging a peaceful demonstration without the authorization. The victims, who filed a complaint at the court in N'Djamena on Tuesday, were supported by the Chadan League of Human Rights and World Organization Against Torture, OMCT. These organizations had in the 2022 report revealed that on October 20, 2022, 216 civilians were killed, dozens tortured and injured, while 1,300 others were arrested by the state. 40 people are still missing from the rally to demand the departure of the then military government. Isidore Nuguelu, Africa Office Manager for MCT, tells WADR about individuals targeted in this legal proceeding and the next line of action.
The complaint that has been submitted is made against the highest officials of the people who were serving during the transition. The first of them being the Prime Minister of the time, Saleh Kabzabo, who had created a mixed unit of command to plan and coordinate the operations of that day. And in one day, more than 200 people were killed. So this is a high crime, and he has to face justice. Next to him are other people serving in the army, who are still serving, other people who are holding police stations where people were arrested and tortured during several days. But we acknowledge the fact that more people could have been tried before courts. We just had to notify then that there was an intention from these officials to perpetrate human rights violations against peaceful protesters. And this is contrary to the constitution of Chad, and this is contrary to human rights instruments, human rights conventions that Chad has ratified. We therefore hope that the justice of Chad will investigate all the violations that have happened, will establish the facts, will identify the authors, will punish them, and will compensate the victims. We would like to, at this stage, clearly state that if these investigations are not carried out, and if the authors are not identified, we will bring this complaint to the international arena. We will bring it to the UN, we will bring it to the African Union, until justice is made on behalf of the victims.
Isidore Nuguelu, Africa Office Manager for MCT.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We're live on Facebook at WADR English Service and on YouTube at WADR. Now, Newslink continues here in Senegal as a rights watchdog has appealed for the review of the country's family code, precisely Article 277, to encourage women's effective participation in various decision-making processes. Amnesty International Senegal made the call at the day workshop in Dakar themed "What Strategies to Achieve Harmonization of Senegalese Family Law with International and Regional Texts Relating to Women." Speaking at the conference, a historian and women's rights activist at Amnesty stressed the need for effective advocacy strategies to reform the various discriminatory provisions in the Senegalese Family Code to achieve gender parity. Christopher Ticho has more the full report.
Senegal has over the years battled with gender-based violence, a situation rooted in the patriarchal conviction and a male superiority backed by the family code law. This social contrast has denied the autonomy of women to achieve their aspirations. Article 277 of the Senegalese Family Code grants the male figure the exclusive authority in the maintenance, education and respect of the rights of children, depriving women of all family and decision-making responsibilities. It is against this backdrop that Amnesty International Senegal, at a day's workshop, called for a review of the country's family code to achieve gender parity under the international and regional conventions. Pande Imbo, a historian and women's rights activist, called on the newly installed 15th legislature to consider revision of the family code.
Supporting citizens is the role of the government. And my opinion is the state must be favorable for change. And specifically in this period, parliamentarian will be very, very, very important, because it is where we can have democratical debate, democratical discussion, but also it is the way where we can have the change. And the women fight to have parity law. They have parity law. They are perhaps 98 or 97% of the parliament. This must be the backbone of change in our society.
Participants at the workshop on Tuesday proposed strategies to reform discriminatory provisions in the family code while engaging in dialogue between women's rights defenders, state representatives, and legal practitioners to share experiences and expertise.
Augustine Collier report, Christopher Teacher reporting there. President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria late Tuesday welcomed his German counterpart Frank-Walter Steinmeier in Abuja, the nation's capital. Steinmeier, whose visit to Nigeria is scheduled to span through to December 12, 2024, is expected to engage in a series of activities such as a meeting with President Tinubu, as well as the President of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Ali Umar Toure, amongst others. The German president will also engage with business representatives, a visit to a startup hub in Lagos, a commercial hub, and meet with members of Nigeria's cultural sector and civil society. Still in Nigeria, the Senate has passed a bill mandating the domestic processing of at least 30% of raw materials before exportation, moving it to the second reading. The proposed amendment to the Raw Materials Research and Development Council Act 2022 aims to bolster local production and shield domestic industries from foreign competition. WADR's Usman Omar, however, reports that the bill is generating mixed reactions.
And congratulate all Nigerians that yes, indeed, we will now have value addition, and then we will now focus more on mining as a major revenue source for the country.
That was President of the Nigerian Senate, Godswill Akpabio, after a voice vote where the majority supported the bill, allowing it to move to the next legislative stage. Nigeria's move mirrors efforts across Africa to limit raw material export in favor of local value addition. International affairs analyst Wisdom Aka praised the bill, describing it as a reflection of Nigeria's alignment with continental trends to enhance resource-based industrialization.
For a country that has a lot of raw materials, to have them exported abroad and then only for them to be brought back as finished products, there is no kind of underdevelopment that can be as bad as this. If Nigeria can begin to process its abundant raw materials at home, it will boost the economy. The advantages are endless.
On the flip side, a public affairs analyst, Festus Ejirogene, criticized the initiative, arguing that Nigeria's industrial infrastructure is not equipped to handle large-scale processing.
If you ask yourself today as a Nigerian, if we must be sincere with ourselves, where can you point to one particular area or one state in the country where you still have factories, industries that are still working the way they are supposed to work? Is just a political statement.
As the legislation progresses, stakeholders remain divided over its potential impact, with proponents emphasizing its transformative prospects and critics cautioning against premature implementation in the absence of adequate infrastructure. It is worth noting that Nigeria remains heavily reliant on exporting unprocessed commodities. In 2023 alone, more than $57 billion of goods, including petrol gas, priced at $9.4 billion, nitrogenous fertilizer estimated at $2 billion, and gold, valued at $806 million, were exported from Nigeria. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Omar reporting from Abuja.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. In Ghana, more than 100 suspects are in police custody in connection with the nationwide post-election violence. Victims of the October 2022 violence in Chad filed a complaint at the court in N'Djamena seeking justice and reparations. Amnesty International calls for a review of Senegal's family code to achieve gender parity. A bill mandating 30% domestic processing of Nigerian commodities before export passes for a second reading at the Red Chamber. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
With more than 100 million children, especially those with special needs, out of school across Africa, heads of state, policymakers, education experts, and other stakeholders have converged on Nouakchott, the Mauritanian capital, for a continental conference on education. The 3-day event focusing on building an inclusive, equitable educational system on the continent also has in attendance civil society and private sector players. The conference, jointly organized by the African Union Commission and UNICEF, is being chaired by the Mauritanian president under the theme Educating and Skilling Africa for the 21st Century. Atisu reports.
The UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, says although significant progress has been made in terms of access to education, the continent still faces persistent challenges. More than 100 million children, including girls, those with special needs and others impacted by conflicts, are out of school. Major obstacles such as inadequate infrastructure, lack of qualified teachers, regional disparities, and limited access to digital technologies continue to hold back progress. Ted Chaiban is Deputy Executive Director, Humanitarian Action and Supply Operations at UNICEF.
So let us articulate the vision for the future. We can do this by investing in teachers as the heartbeat of the education system. We can work to leverage the latest breakthroughs in technology. We need to support the continuity of learning, which is often disrupted by a range of factors from climate to conflicts. And adequate financial resources are key for success.
According to the African Union, an estimated 40 billion is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals set out in the AU's Agenda 2063. The conference therefore seeks not only to evaluate the progress made by AU members in implementing SDG 4 and the Continental Strategy for Education in Africa, but set new goals. Musa Faki Mahamat is president of the AU Commission.
Despite significant progress in terms of access to education, the challenges to be overcome remain numerous. Millions of African children are still not in school, while many of those in the classrooms do not have access to quality education to read, write, and calculate. We are therefore deeply challenged to draw the signs of a future where education will catalyze the development of Africa, as we must commit to achieving ambitious, bold, and measurable results.
The Nouakchott Conference aims to formulate strategic recommendations that will be set out in a roadmap for the next 10 years, including increased financial commitments to scale up innovative initiatives and mobilization of development partners and the private sector.
A report filed in by Atisu. And now to health matters, a new report by the World Health Organization WHO says malaria mortality has fallen back to levels seen before the COVID-19 crisis, calling for urgent action to stop this trend. The WHO report published Wednesday reveals that nearly 497,000 people died of malaria last year. The Global Health Organization informs that there were 263 million cases of malaria worldwide last year, which is about 11 million more than the previous year, while the death toll remained relatively stable. The estimated 2023 mortality rate in Africa of 52.4 deaths per 100,000 population at risk remains more than double the target level set by a global strategy for combating malaria through 2030. WHO said insistent progress must be accelerated. Here, the UN Health Agency points to the wider rollout of malaria vaccines as a promising development expected to save tens of thousands of young lives each year.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
We head to Banjul, where Sam Kulijanko is on standby to take us through the newspaper review.
Hello there and welcome to this edition of the Press Review. Coming to you from Banjul, the Gambia. Let's begin with the Standard newspaper. And a very interesting lead story. Chief Magistrate Njai charged with drug dealing. Magistrate Njai is the Chief Magistrate in the Gambia. And according to this lead story, he is charged with drug dealing. U.S. Secretary of State confers Anti-Corruption Champion Award on Mar Nyang. Mar Nyang is a human rights activist and he's into a whole lot of activities in the Gambia, and he's been conferred on by the U.S. Secretary of State for his anti-corruption advocacy. Government admits Africa 50 deal precludes it from bridge building within 50-kilometer radius of Senegambia Bridge until, well, that's the story on the Standard newspaper. CBG governor addresses Africa Finance Summit. That's the central bank of the Gambia Governor Boa Seydi. Ex-KMC CEO admits taking 30k bribe, and Jawara wins Heritage Times African Philanthropist Award. Let's move on to the Fourier newspaper. And interestingly, the lead story on the Fourier newspaper is the same story because it reads, Chief Magistrate Pamodunjai faces 6 criminal charges. Just like the Standard newspaper published, he has been charged for drug dealing, and now Fourier is saying that the Chief Magistrate faces 6 criminal charges relating to drug and others. Assembly ought to allow new draft constitution to committee stage. GPU, that is Gambia Press Union President, calls for media law reforms and more freedom. Residents urge government to provide abattoir ovens as Meet the People tour ends in Banjul. By Emil Toure receives Press Freedom Hero Award, and GRA trains staff on risk management to boost revenue collection. Let's take a look at the final newspaper for today. Human rights protection is a legal duty, not a choice. That is according to NHRC Chairman Emmanuel D. Juve. This other one reads, Dabo responds to rural women's concern over water shortage, and Barrow warns anti-littering laws will fully be implemented. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Sankule Janko there with the press review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In accordance with the provisions of the Ghana Presidential Transition Act 2012, President-elect John Dramani Mahama set up a 10-member transitional team to work closely with representatives of the outgoing government of Nana Akufo-Addo to ensure a smooth transfer of power to the incoming administration. The transition team, which will be inaugurated today at the Jubilee House, is composed of individuals drawn from various sectors, including finance, governance, and public administration. Our guest on this edition of Newslink, a political analyst and associate professor at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, Professor Eche Sekanku, calls for a smooth transition while urging the new government to remain accountable to the citizens.
It's important that both teams operate within an atmosphere of cordiality, of decency and respect. There will be attention paid to key processes in terms of handing over the various ministries, the civil service, the various arms of government, but particularly the financial health of the nation, the security situation, and also issues that have to do with legal and defense frameworks.
From where you sit, what should be his posture when he takes over the transition document?
A new president is always elected because of the wishes and the desires of the people to take the country in a new direction. And the propensity of the win indicates that the president or the new president does have a mandate because it was a total repudiation of the previous administration. And so, yes, it indicates a desire of the people to take the country in a different direction. However, one of the major concerns of governance experts and observers or analysts has been the discontinuation of projects by a previous government, sometimes leading to huge loss of revenue because some of those projects have been abandoned and also have not been pursued to the logical conclusion. And so the benefits expected from them have not accrued to the people. I think this is thought of in terms of the loss of revenue and the huge burden it will place on the finance of the country. So there's a general acceptance that new governments should not totally abandon, especially for those which were almost at a completion stage and which on the whole might lead to some loss of revenue. There is that indication on the part of governance and experts, observers, and even the general public that there would be, as far as the national development plan orientation is concerned, that kind of continuity, but that's an audit that has to be done, and it is within the prerogative of the new administration to decide which ones are worth continuing.
How should the next John Dramani Mahama's administration govern to ensure accountability and progress and prosperous Ghana?
Accountability is two ways from the side of the government. They've got to be transparent. They've got to make themselves accessible. They have to be responsive. So I think this is what would lead to accountability, responsive to the needs of the people, transparency, and they have to be accessible and know that they continuously need to report back. There has to be a good feedback and reporting mechanism whereby the people and the citizens are kept abreast with what is going on. But also there's, another side of it where civil society organizations, the media, and even the ordinary citizens do have that responsibility to make the request of government and to hold them accountable.
Would there be pressure, and is there pressure on John Dramani Mahama to change the fortunes of the country, knowing very well the economic distress that the country is currently facing?
The economy was one of the major, if not the major factors upon which many people voted. People felt
In the world of sports, the 2024 CAF Award final 3 nominees for Men's Player of the Year and Women's Player of the Year will be announced on Soccer Africa, the continent's most popular football magazine, this Thursday, 12th December 2024. The annual CAF Award will happen on December 16, 2024 in Marrakesh, Morocco, where the finest African footballers, coaches and administrators will gather to crown the best of the best. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to the technical and production team for the support. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is WADR's flagship gender program 50/50. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio.